My name is Eleanor Bennett. I'm 30 years old, and for the first 22 years of my life, I wasn't a daughter. I was a ghostwriter for my family's success. Last Tuesday, I stood in a sleek, minimalist gallery in Mayfair, London, watching the very people who once looked right through me bid thousands of pounds for my work. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a photo from my sister, Sarah. It was a shot of our parents standing in the middle of Piccadilly Circus, their faces pale and drawn, staring up at a 50-foot digital billboard. It featured my signature, wildflower, pattern, the one they'd told the world was Sarah's creative breakthrough for the last 8 years. Underneath, in bold, elegant letters, it read, Eleanor Bennett, the original voice. What I did to get to that gallery didn't involve a single scream or a broken plate, but it effectively erased 30 years of my family's carefully curated lies. And as I looked around the room, I realized that 3 of their biggest international clients were standing right there, recording the whole thing on their iPhones. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where we tell the quiet kind of revenge. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't break fine china, and doesn't make you the villain. If you've ever been the person holding the family together while they took the credit, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe so the next one finds you. Before I tell you about the billboard, I need to tell you about Bennett and Sons Fine Linens. To the outside world, it was a bastion of British heritage, a boutique in a picturesque Cotswold village that provided bespoke textiles for the country's elite. My father, George, was the face of the business, charming, silver-haired, and always ready with a story about tradition. My mother, Martha, managed the books with a cold, calculating efficiency. And then there was Sarah. Sarah was 3 years older, perfectly polished, and possessed a social drive that could move mountains. She was the creative director, the one who gave interviews to Tatler and Vogue about her innate connection to the English landscape. The problem was, Sarah couldn't draw a straight line if her life depended on it. And I, Eleanor, was the inconvenient truth hidden in the shadows of their carefully constructed facade. My earliest memories are not of toys or games, but of colors and textures. While other children in our quaint Cotswold village played hide-and-seek amongst the ancient stone walls, I was often found in my grandmother's dusty attic, mesmerized by the intricate embroidery on her old shawls, the way light danced on the woven threads, the silent stories hidden in every delicate stitch. I would spend hours tracing the patterns with my tiny fingers, imagining the hands that had created them, the lives they had touched. This wasn't just a hobby. It was an innate calling, a deep-seated fascination with the visual language of textiles. My parents, George and Martha, owned Bennett and Sons Fine Linens, a business that had been in our family for 3 generations. It was nestled in a picture postcard setting, a charming stone building with a display window that showcased their wares, heavy damask curtains, stiff lace tablecloths, and floral patterns that hadn't changed since the Edwardian era. To the tourists who flocked to the Cotswolds, it was a delightful slice of British heritage. To me, it was a beautiful, but slowly decaying, relic. The business was struggling, clinging to a dwindling clientele of loyal, elderly customers who appreciated tradition above all else. The younger market, the vibrant, trend-conscious buyers, simply weren't interested. I was a quiet child, often found sketching in my room or in the sprawling, slightly overgrown garden behind our house. My parents, busy with the daily grind of keeping the business afloat, saw my artistic inclination as a pleasant, harmless hobby, something a young lady did to pass the time before she settled down. Sarah, on the other hand, was groomed for a different kind of spotlight. 3 years my senior, she was sent to the best finishing schools, taught how to network, how to charm, how to present herself, and, by extension, the family business. She was the heir apparent, the public face of Bennett and Sons, even though her true talent lay in consumption and social maneuvering, not creation. She excelled at hosting elegant garden parties and making small talk with influential buyers, but her understanding of design was superficial at best. When I was 16, a pivotal moment arrived. I enrolled in a weekend art course at the local college, mostly to escape the suffocating atmosphere of expectation at home. It was there that my tutor, a kind but brutally honest woman named Mrs. Davies, saw something in my work. I had brought in a sketchbook filled with my reinterpretations of classic English botanical motifs infused with a modern, almost abstract sensibility. "Eleanor," she'd say, peering over my shoulder at a particularly vibrant floral pattern, her spectacles perched on her nose. "This isn't just pretty. This has a voice. A modern voice rooted in tradition. This is what the world needs. This is what Bennett and Sons needs." Her words were a revelation, a jolt of electricity. They were the first time anyone had ever acknowledged my art as more than just a pastime, as something with genuine commercial and artistic merit. Inspired, I started experimenting with a feverish intensity. I took the classic English botanical motifs that were the hallmark of Bennett and Sons and reinterpreted them with a contemporary twist. I played with bolder colors, more abstract forms, and unexpected juxtapositions. I envisioned how these designs could breathe new life into our family business, how they could appeal to a younger, more discerning market, the very demographic we were losing. Naively, brimming with excitement and hope, I showed my parents my portfolio, a collection of vibrant sketches and mock-ups. Their reaction was measured. My father, ever the pragmatist, stroked his chin, his eyes scanning the pages with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Quite striking, Eleanor. A bit daring for our usual clientele, perhaps, but there's certainly something here. A freshness." My mother, Martha, with her sharp eyes that missed nothing, immediately saw the commercial potential, her gaze lingering on the sales figures from the previous quarter. "These could work for the spring collection, George. If we tone down the colors a little, make them more Bennett." Sarah, who had wandered in, barely glanced at my work, her attention already drifting back to her phone. "Oh, that's nice, Ellie. Very you. But a bit too busy for a luxury brand, don't you think? It lacks a certain timelessness." Her dismissive tone was a familiar sting, a subtle way of undermining my confidence without outright criticizing the work itself. Despite Sarah's lukewarm reception, my parents, driven by the dwindling sales figures, decided to incorporate a few of my designs into the next collection. They were an instant hit. The wildflower meadow pattern, a delicate yet vibrant fusion of traditional English flora with a modern geometric overlay, flew off the shelves. Orders surged. New clients, younger and more affluent, started inquiring. It was exhilarating for a while. The business, which had been on the brink, was suddenly thriving. But the credit, of course, went to the new creative direction at Bennett and Sons, spearheaded by Sarah. My name was never mentioned. I was the quiet artist, tucked away in the converted garden shed at the back of our estate, churning out hit after hit, while my sister basked in the glory, giving interviews to Tatler and Vogue about her innate connection to the English landscape and her vision for modern British textiles. She became the darling of the design world, a self-made success story, all built on the foundation of my unseen labor. My shed became my sanctuary and my prison. It was where my creativity flowed, where I could lose myself in the intricate dance of colors and forms, but also where my identity was slowly being erased. I spent countless nights hunched over a light table, my fingers stained with ink, developing the very patterns that made us famous. I was the one who combined 18th century botanical sketches with modern, abstract geometries. I was the one who spent months perfecting the exact shade of Cotswold sage that every interior designer in London was suddenly obsessed with. I was the one who created the wildflower meadow pattern that would eventually become synonymous with Bennett and Sons and later, with my own quiet rebellion. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. The more successful the business became, the more invisible I felt. Whenever I dared to ask why my name wasn't on the designs, why I couldn't have a small credit, the answer was always a variation of the same theme, delivered with a practiced ease that suggested it had been rehearsed. "Eleanor, darling," my mother would say, not looking up from her ledger, her voice as sharp and precise as her accounting, "the Bennett name is a brand. It's a legacy. Splitting it up only weakens us. You're part of the team. A vital part, of course. We all know your contribution." My father would put a heavy hand on my shoulder, a gesture meant to be comforting but felt like a cage, a subtle reminder of my place. We're building this for your future, Ellie. Don't let ego get in the way of family. One day, this will all be yours and Sarah's. And Sarah? Sarah would just offer that tight, superior smile, the one that said she knew exactly what I was worth, and she intended to keep it for herself. She'd often add, with a condescending pat on my arm, "Besides, Ellie, you're not really a front-of-house person, are you? You prefer your quiet little shed. And that's perfectly fine. We all have our roles. Mine is to shine. Yours is to create." Their words, delivered with such casual authority, chipped away at my self-worth, piece by agonizing piece. I started to believe them. Maybe I wasn't meant for the spotlight. Maybe my role was to be the silent engine, the unseen force behind their success. The shed, once a place of creative freedom, began to feel like a gilded cage. I was the golden goose, laying eggs for a family that never acknowledged my existence, only my output. The emotional toll was immense. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, watching others take credit for my dreams. The joy I once found in creating slowly began to curdle into a deep, festering resentment. Every stroke of my brush, every carefully chosen thread, was now tinged with a bitterness that threatened to consume me. I remember one specific night in 2018. I'd just finished the Winter Solstice collection, a particularly challenging series of designs inspired by the stark, ethereal beauty of the English winter landscape. I was exhausted, my back aching, my eyes blurring from hours of meticulous work under the dim shed light. I walked into the main house, hoping for a quiet cup of tea and perhaps, just perhaps, a word of genuine appreciation. Instead, I found them celebrating a massive order from a prestigious hotel group in Dubai. The living room was filled with the clinking of expensive champagne flutes, the scent of imported canapes, and the sound of Sarah's boisterous laughter, echoing off the antique furniture. When I walked in, Sarah didn't offer me a glass. She barely acknowledged my presence, her eyes already scanning the room for more important guests. Instead, she handed me her empty flute, lipstick still smudged on the rim, and said, with a dismissive wave, "Be a dear and wash this, Ellie. And the studio needs a tidy before the photographers arrive tomorrow. We can't have it looking like a mess, darling. It's a reflection on us." That was it. Not a shout, not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, insidious dismissal that cut deeper than any argument. It was the culmination of years of being unseen, unheard, and uncredited. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The resentment hardened into an unshakable resolve. I realized I couldn't change them. I could only change myself and my situation. The meadow, as Sarah so eloquently put it, was indeed empty. But it was about to be replanted, not by them, but by me, and this time, my name would be on every single bloom. The silence that followed my decision was deafening, but it was also the sound of my own liberation. I was done being their ghost. It was time to become my own legend. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a whisper. In 2021, Bennett and Sons was awarded the British Design Excellence Trophy. It was the highest honor in our industry, a glittering affair held at the iconic V&A Museum in South Kensington. I was invited, of course, but not as a guest of honor. I was seated at the very back, at a table tucked away behind a pillar, next to the catering staff's relatives. I watched Sarah walk onto that stage in a 4,000-pound gown, a gown paid for by the patterns I'd stayed up all night to finish. She took the gleaming trophy, looked out at the sea of flashing cameras and adoring faces, and delivered a speech that felt like a dagger to my heart. "I've spent my life searching for the soul of the English meadow," she began, her voice perfectly modulated, her smile radiant. "Every line I draw, every color I choose, comes from a place of deep, personal connection to our heritage, to the rolling hills of the Cotswolds, to the very essence of British design." She spoke for what felt like an eternity, weaving a narrative of artistic struggle and triumph, of dedication and vision. She thanked our parents, the tireless team, the loyal clients. She didn't mention me, not once. She didn't even glance in my direction, as if I were truly invisible, a phantom in the room. I left the gala before the main course was served. The rich aroma of truffle oil and roasted duck followed me out, a stark contrast to the bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't go back to the Cotswolds. The thought of returning to that gilded cage, to that shed that had become both my sanctuary and my prison, was unbearable. I took a night bus to London, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked window, each drop a silent tear I refused to shed. I had nothing but my worn sketchbook, a small rucksack with a change of clothes, and the 300 pounds I'd managed to hide over the years in a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice in my shed. I left a short, stark note on the kitchen table, knowing it would be found by Martha, whose sharp eyes miss nothing. The meadow is empty. Find your own soul. The next 2 years were the hardest of my life. I landed in London, a city of millions, and felt utterly alone. I found a tiny, drafty room in a shared house in Hackney, East London, with 6 other people, students, struggling artists, and a perpetually unemployed musician. The walls were paper-thin, the heating was temperamental at best, and the kitchen always smelled of burnt toast and damp. My bed was a mattress on the floor, my studio a corner of my cramped room where I could barely fit my drawing board. The contrast to the sprawling Cotswold estate, to my private shed, was brutal. I worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over my head and food in my stomach. Barista by morning, pouring lattes for hurried commuters in Shoreditch. Retail assistant by day, folding clothes in a boutique on Oxford Street, watching women my age buy designer pieces I could only dream of creating for myself. And freelance illustrator by night, taking on any small gig I could find, logo designs for local businesses, custom invitations, even pet portraits. I lived on instant noodles and the sheer, cold fury that lived in my chest. It was a constant, simmering anger, a fuel that kept me going when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. I stopped answering my parents' calls. The first few weeks, they were frantic, then concerned, then increasingly demanding. "Eleanor, where are you?" My mother would text, her messages growing colder. "You're hurting the business. The spring collection is due, and Sarah is struggling with creative block. Come home and stop this childishness. This is not how a Bennett behaves." My father's emails were more direct, laced with thinly veiled threats about my obligations to the family. I blocked Sarah on everything. The thought of her smug face, her perfectly coiffed hair, was enough to send a fresh wave of determination through me. During those long, lonely nights in Hackney, I taught myself everything I needed to know to build my own brand. I devoured books on business, marketing, and intellectual property law. I learned how to build a website from scratch, how to file for trademarks, and how to navigate the shark-infested waters of the London art scene. I vowed never to let someone else own my voice again. It was a slow, arduous climb, filled with self-doubt and financial struggles. There were days I questioned everything, wondering if I had made a mistake, leaving the comfort, however uncredited, of my family's business. Was I just being a petulant child, as Sarah had implied? Was my ego truly getting in the way of family, as my father had suggested? But every time I felt like giving up, I remembered Sarah's triumphant speech at the V&A, my parents' dismissive smiles, and the feeling of being erased. That memory was a potent antidote to self-pity. It fueled me. I started small, hand-printing tea towels and tote bags with my own unique designs, selling them at the bustling Hackney Wick markets. People noticed. They noticed the originality. They noticed that my work had a depth, a vibrancy, and a technical precision that the recent Bennett and Sons collections were suddenly lacking. Because, without me, Sarah was trying to copy my old sketches, and the industry, with its discerning eye, could tell the difference. Their sales started to slip. Their vision became blurry, a pale imitation of what it once was. The whispers began in the exclusive circles of London design, whispers about a new talent emerging, an authentic voice that was shaking up the established order. My reputation grew organically, word of mouth spreading through the independent art scene. I started getting commissions for bespoke textile art installations for trendy restaurants and boutique hotels in East London. Each project was a small victory, a brick laid in the foundation of my own empire. I was no longer just Eleanor Bennett. I was EB Studio, a name that stood for authenticity, innovation, and uncompromising artistic integrity. The shed, once a symbol of my confinement, was now a distant memory, replaced by the vibrant, chaotic energy of my new London life. I was finally free to create, to experiment, to be truly myself. And with each brushstroke, each new pattern, I was not just building a business, I was reclaiming my story, one thread at a time. The opportunity of a lifetime came when a curator from the prestigious Aurelian Gallery in Mayfair saw my work at a pop-up shop in Shoreditch. Her name was Isabella Rossi, a woman with an impeccable eye and a reputation for discovering raw talent. She didn't know I was a Bennett. She just knew the work was extraordinary. She spent an hour at my tiny stall, meticulously examining every print, every stitch on my hand-dyed scarves. "Eleanor," she said, her voice a low, thoughtful murmur, "this isn't just design. This is storytelling. This is art. Have you ever considered a solo exhibition?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. A solo exhibition. In Mayfair. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, a validation that went beyond any family approval. I tried to keep my voice steady as I told her about EB's studio, about my journey. She listened intently, her gaze unwavering. "Your story," she concluded, "is as compelling as your art. We need to tell both." She offered me a show, 6 months down the line. 6 months to create a collection that would define me, not as a Bennett but as Eleanor Bennett. I poured every ounce of my being into those 6 months. I rented a slightly larger, though still damp, studio space in an old warehouse in Dalston. I worked day and night, fueled by strong English breakfast tea and the burning desire to prove not just to my family, but to myself, that I was capable of this. I didn't just create new work, I reclaimed my past. I took the concepts I developed in that damp shed in the Cotswolds, the wildflower motifs, the geometric patterns, the subtle color palettes, and I evolved them. I made them bigger, bolder, and undeniably mine. Each piece was a conversation between my past and my future, a testament to the journey I had undertaken. I created a series of large-scale textile art pieces, some incorporating intricate embroidery, others using innovative digital printing techniques, all bearing my distinct artistic signature. These weren't just designs for linens, they were statements. During this time, I started to hear whispers about Bennett and Sons. Their sales were reportedly plummeting. The British Design Excellence Award, once a beacon, now seemed to mock them. Sarah was apparently struggling with creative block, a phrase that brought a bitter smile to my lips. Without my constant stream of original designs, she was trying to copy my old sketches, and the industry, with its discerning eye, could tell the difference. Their vision became blurry, a pale imitation of what it once was. I heard through the grapevine that they were losing key accounts, that their reputation for innovation was rapidly eroding. It was a slow, agonizing decline, and I, from my little studio in Dalston, was an unwilling, yet undeniable, catalyst. I didn't send an invitation to my family for the Mayfair exhibition. I didn't need to. The London art and design world is a small, interconnected web, and news travels fast. I knew they would find out. I knew they would see. This wasn't about a private confrontation. It was about a public declaration. It was about my art finally speaking for itself, in a language they could no longer ignore. The night of the opening was surreal. The Aurelian Gallery, usually a hushed sanctuary, was buzzing with energy. It was filled with the elite of the design world, collectors, critics, journalists, and influential buyers. My work, illuminated by carefully placed spotlights, seemed to glow with a life of its own. I saw faces I recognized from magazines, people whose opinions shaped the industry. I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and calm. This was it. This was my moment. And then, the quiet revenge happened. I'd worked with a major outdoor advertising firm to secure a prime digital billboard at Piccadilly Circus for the opening week. It was an audacious move, incredibly expensive, but it was the final, undeniable piece of the puzzle. I knew my family would be in London for the Design Festival, an annual event they never missed. I knew they'd be walking through Piccadilly, perhaps on their way to a networking event or a dinner. I knew they'd see it. My wildflower pattern, vibrant and unmistakable, emblazoned across a 50-foot screen, with my name, Eleanor Bennett, the original voice, shining brightly beneath it. Just as Isabella was introducing me to a prominent art critic, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. A photo. Our parents, George and Martha, standing in the middle of Piccadilly Circus, their faces pale and drawn, looking up at the giant digital billboard. Sarah's message, sent moments later, was a torrent of panicked, angry words. "How could you do this? You're destroying everything we built. This is a betrayal." Her words, once so powerful, now felt hollow, desperate. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My art had already spoken. My name was finally on the label, in the biggest, brightest way possible. In the gallery, the CEO of the Dubai Hotel Group, Mr. Al-Farsi, a man Sarah had charmed 3 years ago into a lucrative contract, was standing in front of my main piece, a sprawling textile installation titled Reclaimed Meadow. He looked at the intricate details, then at the small, elegant signature in the corner, and then directly at me. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying an undeniable weight. "I've been wondering why the quality of our linen orders from Bennett & Sons has dropped so significantly lately. The patterns have become uninspired. I think I just found the answer." His gaze was knowing, a silent acknowledgement of the truth that had just been laid bare. Other clients, some of whom had been loyal to Bennett & Sons for decades, began to murmur, their eyes darting between my work and their phones, where news of the Piccadilly billboard was undoubtedly spreading like wildfire. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I felt a profound sense of relief. The weight of 22 years of silence, of being unseen and uncredited, was finally gone. My family's business didn't collapse overnight, but the lie did. And in the cutthroat world of high-end design, a lie is the one thing you can't fix with a new collection, no matter how many garden parties Sarah attends. The whispers in the gallery were louder than any shout, and they spoke of a new star, an original voice, finally stepping into the light. The next few days were a blur of interviews, photo shoots, and meetings with potential buyers. The Aurelian Gallery was packed from morning till night. The story of the uncredited artist from the Cotswolds who had reclaimed her voice in London was a sensation. Every major art and design publication, from Art Review to Wallpaper, wanted a piece of Eleanor Bennett. It was exhilarating but also incredibly draining. I was living the dream I had secretly nurtured for years, but the shadow of my past still loomed. My phone, which had been buzzing nonstop with congratulatory messages from new contacts, also held a growing number of missed calls and increasingly desperate voicemails from my family. Sarah's messages had shifted from anger to a frantic, almost pleading tone. "Eleanor, please, you have to stop this. You're ruining everything," she'd shriek in one voicemail. "Father is having palpitations. Mother is beside herself." My mother's messages were colder, more manipulative. "Eleanor, think of the family name. Think of the legacy. You're tearing us apart." My father, usually so composed, left a rambling message about disloyalty and ungratefulness. I ignored them all. I had spent too long listening to their voices, letting them dictate my worth. Now it was my turn to be heard. But the truth was, despite the triumph, a part of me still yearned for their acknowledgement, for a genuine apology. It was a foolish hope, I knew, but old wounds heal slowly. Then, on the third day of the exhibition, Isabella Rossi, the curator, approached me with a grave expression. "Eleanor," she said, her voice hushed, "your father is here. George Bennett. He's demanding to see you." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The confrontation I had both dreaded and secretly anticipated. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked towards the gallery entrance. George Bennett, the man who had once been my hero, stood there, looking utterly out of place amidst the avant-garde art and chic crowd. He was no longer the charming, silver-haired patriarch. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow, and his expensive suit seemed to hang loosely on his frame. He looked older, smaller, defeated. Sarah stood beside him, her usual polished facade cracked, her eyes red-rimmed. My mother, Martha, was nowhere to be seen, a small mercy. "Eleanor," my father began, his voice a strained whisper. "What have you done?" He gestured vaguely around the gallery, as if it were a crime scene. "You've destroyed everything. Our reputation, our clients." He trailed off, unable to meet my gaze. "I haven't destroyed anything, Father," I replied, my voice calm, steady, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "I merely revealed the truth that my art, my designs, were the foundation of your legacy. The truth that you built your success on my silence." I saw Sarah flinch, but my father remained impassive, his face a mask of denial. "This is not the way, Eleanor," he said, finally looking at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. Family supports each other. We gave you everything." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "We need you back, Ellie. The new collection. Sarah is struggling. We can make this right. We can give you a proper title, a share in the business." It was the same old song, a desperate attempt to lure me back into the gilded cage. The offer of a proper title, now, after years of exploitation, felt like a cruel joke. "It's too late, Father," I said, my voice firm. "I built my own stage. My art has its own name now, EB Studio, and it doesn't need the Bennett name to shine." I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not understanding, but perhaps a dawning realization of the magnitude of what he had lost. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. "Eleanor, please. Think of the clients. Mr. Al-Farsi from Dubai is furious. He's threatening to pull his entire contract. He was here, you know. He saw your work. He saw our work. He knows." Her voice was a desperate plea, devoid of its usual superiority. "We can't afford to lose him. We can't afford to lose any more clients. The business it's in trouble." I looked at my sister, the woman who had so eagerly taken credit for my talent, who had dismissed my contributions with a tight smile. "That's your problem, Sarah," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You built a business on a lie. And lies, in the world of high-end design, are the one thing you can't fix with a new collection." I turned back to my father. "You wanted a legacy, Father? You have one. But it's not the one you thought you were building. It's the legacy of a family that silenced its own daughter for profit. And that, I'm afraid, is a truth that will echo far longer than any of your traditions." I walked away then, leaving them standing there, two figures shrinking in the vastness of the gallery. I didn't look back. The weight of 22 years of silence, of being unseen and uncredited, was finally gone. My family's business didn't collapse overnight, but the lie did. And in the cutthroat world of high-end design, a lie is the one thing you can't fix with a new collection, no matter how many garden parties Sarah attends. The whispers in the gallery were louder than any shout, and they spoke of a new star, an original voice, finally stepping into the light. If you've ever had to build your own stage because the one you were on was a lie, drop the word original in the comments. I see you. And stay tuned, because what happened when my father, George Bennett, finally walked into that gallery? Well, that's a story for the next video.